Hello, guys. Everyone, happy Thursday. Let's just wait for Kay. Today's topic is actually going to talk about. Hey, Tristan. Hey, Tristan.
Hello.
Hey, plant based. So I was just telling them that this week we're going to talk about what?
We are talking about how we maintain our plant collections.
Large, large plant
Large.
collection. We use quote unquote because it might be subjective, but
Mhm.
technically I think that it can be considered large. You know what? What I forgot to do was actually count my plants.
You what?
Like literally count them by
Oh,
pot.
I've never counted.
You've never. I
I
once did because Maria asked me to. But shout out to Maria, Bloom and Grow Radio.
yes, Maria. Maria's awesome. And she has a new thing. She has a new project
Mm-hmm.
she's launching too. So you guys go check that out.
Yes.
Yes.
So yeah, how are you?
I'm
First of
good.
all,
I'm good.
good. I love your hair.
Thank
Can we
you.
talk
It's really time
about
for a cut.
I probably need a haircut too, but um, I need to book an appointment. Hey everyone! So yeah, welcome. We're back.
We are back and ready to go. Shall we kick it off?
Yes.
Let's do it.
So yeah,
So,
let's do our intro first.
oh, that's right. That's right. Welcome to Planted with Kay and Cy. I'm Kay of
Yeah.
Enrooted Love.
And I'm Cyril of Cyril Cybernated.
And this week we are talking about how we maintain our quote unquote large plant collections.
Plant collections.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about it. So let me ask you, Cy, what is like the one big thing that you do that makes, like, if you had to choose one thing out of your entire routine, what is the one thing that makes maintaining your collection a little bit easier for you?
Well, mine would be designating planty corners or spaces, like where I'm always at when we go live. So I can now refer to this as my plant room because this is where most of my plants are. I would say like a third of my collection. And that makes it easier to maintain when everything's in one area so that whenever I go here, I would remember I have plants to care for, plants to water, plants to probably prune and trim.
I love it.
How about you? What's not talking about designated areas? What's your tip about that?
For me, grouping like plants together.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't necessarily mean like all philodendrons go together and all
Mm-hmm.
monsteras go together. It's more like the type of care that I have noticed since entering my growing environment. The type of care that they need. If there are a group of plants that kind of share similar care requirements, I try and group them together so that it's easier for me to remember what those plants require, but also so that I don't have to go like bouncing around the house, and I can just kind of focus on one area for that day. I am not the type to have like a set schedule. I know this works for a lot of people, but I don't do like one day of just watering. In my collection, in our home, there is always plant maintenance to be done. Every day there is something that needs to be done. And some days it could just be a quick top off for like a handful of plants. And other days it could be a full flush for, a group of plants. So it really just, for me, it just varies. I kind of try to take a more intuitive approach rather than a mechanical approach on plant care. So I take my cues from the plants. So if I see, for me, it's easy. I have 95% of my collection is in passive hydro. So, if I see that the water reservoirs are kind of low, then it's easy for me to just top them off as I go. But yeah, I don't know. It's like when I look around and I think about counting, I'll never count. But when I think about it becomes a bit overwhelming because, I'm like, oh my gosh, like there's a lot of plants here. Like the only sure number that I know is how many Hoyas are on the Hoya wall. And we're maxed out on space there.
I'm sure you could still extend a little bit, a foot to the left, a foot down, a foot up.
Maybe, or I could trade them out, you know?
Yeah.
To like put new stuff. But yeah, I mean, so I know you maintain some of your plants in passive hydro, and then you still maintain some of your plants in organic media as well. How do you navigate around that as far as, you know, your weekly plant care?
So I actually apply all our tips that we identified already. So me going into this room, like 99% of all the plants in here are in passive hydro. So all I have to do is probably check the water levels also daily. I don't have to do all of that during the weekend. Like whenever I'm here, probably like putting out the clothing that I folded for the day. That's also like a chance for me to take a glimpse onto like some of the reservoirs, because the way that I keep my plants are, you know, most of them are in clear water reservoirs. So that gives me all the visibility, like, oh, this one's super dry. And also, just like you, I do constant spot checks all throughout the week so that it doesn't build up. And although I probably would put off like a repotting towards something that I would do over the weekend if it's messy, I need our garden hose outside. So that's something that I could put off. But all throughout the week, definitely, I'm just gonna do spot checks, you know, pick out a yellow leaf here and there, and that, and like taking advantage of the semi or passive hydro setup really saved my life, and saved my plants' life, because they don't get to be overwatered, because I am still guilty of overwatering up until now. But funny how sometimes I completely forget something and let it dry out completely, and it suffers. So because of that inconsistency, self-watering is my go-to way of growing, especially by genus. Like my Hoyas, a lot of my anthuriums, my philodendrons are in passive hydro now. And I feel like that leads to my other tip. Knowing what type of plant parent you are, since I was very much aware that, oh, I tend to overwater. On the first few months of me getting into the plant hobby, I learned that, oh, I tend to overwater. So I probably wouldn't do well with plants that like to stay dry. But but today I do. I keep my cacti and succulents outside. That's what worked for me. So I could keep like hundreds of them outside and just take advantage of the weather without me interfering on or keeping on watering them, and just giving them the chance to live.
Yeah, totally.
And then so that's basically like a concoction of all the tips that we have identified so far. How about you?
Well, I'm going to bring up a point that I feel like every episode I say this, but researching on the plant before I acquire it, or as I'm acquiring it, just so that I can prepare, and just, understanding where the plant is endemic, what the conditions in its natural habitat are, so that I can better replicate that to the best of my ability. And to the extent that it's permissible in my home, really does help me. I'm the type of person who I need to research things. Like that gives me a lot of comfort in knowing that, and confidence really, and this is with everything in life for me, but with plants specifically, I really like to do, a deep dive on a particular plant. First, just knowing where its natural habitat is, and then even comparing notes with other plant collectors. And this may come as a shock to some folks, but although I'm a passive hydro grower, I actually really value the experiences of my plant friends who grow in organic media. Because at the end of the day, the light levels, the humidity levels, even their watering schedule is very helpful information for me. Even though that I'll be growing it in passive hydro, knowing, how much light they're giving it in a indoor or home environment is super helpful to me, and knowing how to balance, the temperature, where in the house it is. And I say all this, guys, and I don't alter anything in my home for my plants. What I do is I assess all the details that I can gather, and then I think, can I grow this plant in my home? Would it be worth it for me to spend the money to acquire this plant? And if so, where in my home would it be happy? And that's kind of the approach that I take. No matter how much I want a plant or think how cool it is, if I don't have a spot for it that, you know, I can immediately designate it for, I won't get it, because, or I'll get rid of something else to make room for it because it's being occupied by, you know, another plant. And like for me, I know you use a lot of grow lights, but I really don't. I rely heavily on natural light because our house allows for it. Mr. and Rooted Love did a really great job in finding a house for us that has just impeccable natural light. And that's not to say that grow lights aren't great, because I think, you know, if you need grow lights and you want to put a plant somewhere where that's not ideal, get that grow light, you know, do what you need to do. But that also, so that kind of ties in with how I maintain the large collection, because if I'm out of spots, like ideal spots in the house, I won't get any more plants. It really helps me. This rule of no grow lights really helps me keep my collecting and my purchasing under control.
And I'm actually the opposite, you know, like before, that's how it worked for me. And then I learned about, you know, supplementing by grow lights and like maximizing my space, really, because that's also my personality. Like I try to accommodate everything up until I get choked or something, you know? So like we both do our approach because we know how we are, like our personalities, physical location, the way we deal with stuff, like our scheduling, our setup, you know. So that also really helps, because you would not be able to adjust or at least know what you can and cannot compromise unless you are set to with everything, really.
Right. Absolutely. I could not agree more. One thing that I do, I feel like I have a little leg up on you, is that I have two little helpers here at home. And they, you know, because my boys are growing up, you know, around all these plants, and to see that for me, it's just a routine. It's a daily thing. They catch themselves doing the same thing. They'll, you know, walk around with their hands folded like this and just kind of looking, you know. Bun will walk around with his spray bottle and be like, oh, this one's thirsty, and spray the leaves. But I have two extra, well, actually three, because Mr. and Rooted Love is also very good about, like, if we're getting nice rain, he brings out his favorite plant outside so that it can get a fresh shower. But yeah, I feel like, you know, not to go tit for tat, but I feel like I'm at just a slight advantage there because I have my little helpers here.
And I think a lot of us acknowledge that once it's an entire family activity, it really lightens the load on everyone.
Yeah.
And like for me, I feel like a big chunk of my appreciation for plants came from me seeing my mom like really take her time being like the crazy plant lady in the block. And then growing up, when I was like big enough to hold the garden hose, I'm designated. That's why I always react when I see your boys like holding the gardening hose outside. It just really brings nice memories. And I can tell that after like 30-ish years of living in the world, like it really creates something with who you are in the future, you know. And you know, some of us will probably just like neglect that. It's like, oh, it's like a normal plant care thing, but you bring that to your adulthood and you bring that to who you're gonna be in the future.
Well, I think, you know, you're a living testament of that, because like you said, with your mom and your Lola, you grew up watching them care for their plants and then assisting here and there, and then now here you are, Mr. Plant Extraordinaire, you know. I love it. So we do have a handful of questions that came in through our stories, and I'd love to go through those with you. Uh, Sarah Esther asked, do you take a picture to water your plants or do you thoroughly soak each one? Because you have a combination of different setups. What do you do in regards to that?
Well, the ones that are on top of the cabinets, I don't thoroughly soak them because the way, well, before I converted, well, there's an update, by the way. They're mostly in self-watering planters and in leca now, I mean pond now. So I just refill the reservoirs. But back when they were in soil, I don't normally soak them because I just water the middle and then let everything drain, and the saucers will hold a little amount of water and then soak it from the bottom. So it's kind of like top and bottom watering at the same time, but not really like letting all the water run through the actual plant. So I got away with that for 2 years, but now I'm just working on making my life easy, self-watering, inorganic. I mean, I still have some plants in organic media, but they're less than the amount that I would usually really spend a lot of time doing, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely just take my watering can and just, because there's nothing here that requires a deep soak.
Yes.
And if there are, actually, that's a lie. My Morganianums, my Sedum Morganianums, or the Burrow's Tails, those I'll take down and I'll do a thorough soak just because I'm afraid to repot them. So they stay in whatever, whatever setup they're in. Okay, at Riza_A28 wants to know, what do you do with plants you fall out of love?
Well, personally, we've done this between ourselves. Like, we send it to each other. If do you want this? I want that. Or like, can I buy that from you instead? So we either let our friends adopt them. And sometimes I'm guilty. It's not just gonna be happy. Sometimes I neglect them to the point that they die on their own.
Yeah, for me, if it's at a point where it's embarrassing to send it to somebody, I kind of just let it live its time out. Or if I know someone who is willing to, like, I just very forthright with them and just say, hey, this is a rehab. Would you like it? And then I just pass it off, and, it's usually under the understanding that, both whoever I'm sending it to knows that this is no strings attached. I don't want it anymore. It may need some TLC, but you're welcome at it. So that's, you and I, we've definitely
that's true.
I don't love this anymore.
Exactly. And I think that's the more, if humans, it's like the more ethical way of dealing with it. Just let someone take care of it and give it more love if you can't give it enough love. That's our first choice, but of course other options happen as well. Depends on
and there's nothing wrong with other options. It's just y'all asked us what we do, so we're telling you.
Okay. Because we're trying to keep our sessions controlled and really there. So was that the 15-minute or is that the 20 already?
So I think I hopped on a little late, so we can call that the 15 minutes. So we've got about 5 more. We have 2 more questions, I think, that we can get through if you want.
Yeah, just throw me the question because my device died already.
Oh, okay, I got you. At Plant Stop Till You Get Enough asks, I have a large collection and pests are an issue. Thoughts on introducing lacewings?
First of all, I love his or her username. Plant Stop Till You Get Enough.
Yes.
I tried lacewings once. It household wise, it was a big argument. Second, because I have cats, they had a good time like watching the bugs. So if you don't have kids, if you don't have pets, that might be an option. But now, after going through that entire ordeal, I feel like lacewings aren't for me because I simply live in a normal house. I don't have like a sunroom where the bugs could probably like hang out there. But I heard that it's really effective. I know someone who lives in the same situation as me, but lacewings are fine. It doesn't bother them. So it's really up to you. Personally, I wouldn't try it anymore. I'll stick with my other means of controlling pests, but not beneficial.
Yeah, kind of in the same boat there. I'm not necessarily comfortable with introducing other bugs to deal with the bugs.
Mm-hmm.
Because in pacifier you still see them.
Yeah.
But it is, I think, a lot easier to manage. So for me, I stick to my Azamax, I stick to insecticidal soap, as well as systemic granules.
Yes.
And that's just what I'm comfortable with. And so that's what I do. Okay, so this one kind of pushes it a little. At Shady465 wants to know, how much money did you spend on your livable collection?
I don't keep track.
Me neither.
I probably kept track during the first 2 weeks. When I start, like, oh, this calathea is $7 from this grocery. I bought it on this date from this grocery or shop. And then after that, I'm like, okay, this is not gonna work because I would not be able to accurately inventory or keep track. So I honestly don't know. For those that were familiar with the Lad Bible Unilad video that came out last year, like, oh, Plant Daddy spent $3,000 to $5,000 on plants. That was a rough estimation, and I honestly don't know. They're market-wise, they would have been worth more, but I try to keep my plant spending to a minimum. I'm not someone who would splurge like 3 digits on one plant. Well, I did some on a few instances, but not one plant. Not really.
Yeah, the same way. I feel like it kind of sucks the fun out of it when you keep a ledger what you spend. And I don't mean that, I'm just spending. That's not it at all, because you would be the first to know that I'm actually very strict on my plant budget. And there's a certain threshold that I won't go over. And honestly, at this point, like, I've had a lot of my plants for so long that they've grown so much that whatever I spent is very different from the value that they are now. And that's not even, I don't base that on what the market value is. I base that on however much I bought it and how much it's grown. You know what I mean? So like, I use that scale. I don't like to use an Alba Monstera is $XXXX. Like, no, like, I know how much I spent on it. I know how much it's grown. I know what the value is for me. But no, there's no way that I would know how much I've spent. And even if I did, I don't think I would be comfortable saying that.
Yeah. There are instances in life wherein not knowing is really better.
Yeah. Plus, also, I feel like it feeds into kind of like the plant price inflation. And that's an aspect of the plant community that I don't want anything to do with.
Yeah, exactly.
I enjoy the plants. I enjoy sharing with friends. You and I have traded, we've gifted. So it's just one of those things that, at the end of the day, I feel like how much I've spent on it doesn't really matter.
Exactly. It's the amount of joy that you get from it, and the joy.
Now, if you want to know how happy I am with my plants, I can tell you that.
That's something you would count for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I think that's all we have for tonight. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Good night.
Good night. Stay tuned for the next episode.
Yes.